The officer asked if I recognized the car that had been parked outside my house every night. I didn't. It started with my neighbor mentioning it casually. "That gray sedan's been there all week," she said. I hadn't noticed. I leave early for work and get back after dark. The next night, I looked. Same car, engine off, someone inside. I told myself it was probably harmless. But when it was still there on the fourth night, I called the non-emergency line. An officer drove by and ran the plate. The car belonged to a former delivery driver who had dropped off a package at my house weeks earlier. He had memorized the address and started parking there at night, watching the house. He admitted he liked the routine. He hadn't approached the door. He hadn't tried to come inside, but he had been there. He was charged with stalking. The car never came back. Now I check the street before. I turn off my lights because sometimes the danger isn't loud. Sometimes it's patient. The detective told me the man had been using my Wi-Fi from inside my house. It started with my dog barking at the hallway closet every evening around the same time. I'd open it, find nothing, and assume he heard something outside. Then I noticed the attic hatch in the ceiling looked slightly shifted, like it hadn't closed all the way. One Saturday, I stayed home instead of going out. Around noon, I heard a faint thud above me. Not the house settling, something heavier, intentional. I grabbed my phone and left immediately, calling the police from my car. They searched the attic and found a man lying between the insulation beams with a backpack, snacks, and a charger plugged into an extension cord he'd run from the hallway outlet. He had been climbing in through a neighboring vacant unit and crossing through the shared attic space. He admitted he'd been coming during the day when I was at work. He wasn't homeless. He just said he needed somewhere quiet. He was arrested for burglary. The attic was sealed off from the neighboring unit, and I moved a month later. The worst part wasn't that he stole anything. It was that he chose my house. I realized someone else was in the office when the motion lights turned on behind me. I was alone that night, finishing a project after everyone else had left. The building always felt different after 9 p.m. Too quiet. Every sound sharper than it should be. The hallway lights were motion-activated, and I'd watch them shut off one by one as coworkers went home. Around 10:30, I walked to the break room for water. The corridor behind me was dark. Halfway back to my desk, I heard a soft click. The lights at the far end of the hallway flicked on. I stopped walking. No doors opened, no voices. Just the hum of the ceiling vents and those lights glowing at the opposite end. I told myself it could be cleaning staff, but they always signed in downstairs, and I hadn't seen anyone. I grabbed my laptop and car keys and headed toward the exit. As I passed the conference room, I saw movement reflected in the glass, someone stepping back out of sight. I didn't investigate. I left and called building security from the parking lot. They checked cameras and found a former contractor who still had an active keycard. He'd been entering late at night, using empty offices to sleep for a few hours before leaving. They revoked his access immediately. The next day, everything looked normal. But now, whenever lights switch on in an empty hallway, I don't assume I'm alone anymore. I was halfway down the stairs when something growled from the dark living room. I live alone, so the sound didn't make sense. It wasn't loud, but it was deep and close, low enough that I felt it in my chest. I froze, one hand on the railing, listening. Another growl. Then the sound of something shifting against the coffee table. I slowly backed up the stairs and locked myself in my bedroom. My mind was racing. How would anything even get inside? All the doors were locked. A heavy thud hit the wall downstairs. I called animal control and waited, barely breathing. When they arrived, they searched the house and found the source curled behind my couch, a raccoon. It had climbed through the chimney, fallen into the fireplace, and wandered into the living room. The growling was it feeling cornered. They safely removed it and capped the chimney that same night. Nothing supernatural, nothing targeted. But for those 15 minutes alone in the dark, knowing something was in my house and not knowing what, it was the most helpless I've ever felt. I woke up because something heavy landed on my chest. At first, I couldn't breathe. It was dark, and whatever it was had weight, real weight. I felt claws press through my blanket and something warm against my neck. I jerked upright, and whatever it was leapt off the bed, hitting the floor with a loud thud. Then I heard it, fast scrambling across my dresser. I turned on my lamp. Two glowing eyes stared back at me from the top of my bookshelf. My bedroom window was open a few inches. I'd cracked it earlier because it was warm outside. Animal control later told me it was a stray cat that likely slipped through the window, got spooked, and jumped onto the first soft surface it saw, me. When I moved, it panicked and tried to climb. They safely removed it, and I closed the window for good. It wasn't paranormal. It wasn't targeted. But waking up to something alive standing on your chest in the middle of the night, that's a kind of fear your body doesn't forget. Last night I learned that silence in the woods isn't peaceful. It's a warning. I went camping alone for the first time. Just a short weekend trip at a public campground. Nothing remote, other sites nearby. I locked my food in the car, zipped up my tent, and went to sleep around midnight. Around 2 a.m. I woke up because everything was quiet. No crickets, no wind, just nothing. Then I heard slow footsteps circling my tent. Not quick, not random, heavy, deliberate, crunching leaves, pausing, moving again. I held my breath. The shape of something large passed against the thin fabric wall, blocking out what little moonlight there was. My entire tent flexed slightly as it brushed against it. I didn't move. I didn't unzip anything. Then came the sniffing, loud, wet, right near my head. I could hear it breathing through the nylon. My phone was inches away, but I didn't dare reach for it. After what felt like forever, the footsteps moved toward the picnic table. Something knocked it hard enough to scrape across the dirt. Then silence again. In the morning, I found deep claw marks on the table and massive paw prints around my tent. A ranger later confirmed a black bear had been roaming the campground that night. It probably smelled something faint, toothpaste, deodorant, anything scented. I followed all the food rules. It still came that close. I don't camp alone anymore, because there's something about lying in a thin layer of fabric. Knowing something bigger than you is inches away, deciding whether or not you're worth the effort.